I absolutely love the sound that I heard when I walked into the room, and that was everybody talking with each other. We work in an industry where no matter what technology comes to play, no matter what new innovations there may be, it's still about people connecting with people. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all here today to the Renaissance, to the DIY Tourism Conference, and to introduce myself. My name is Steve Ekstrom. I am the CEO and co-founder of Learn Tourism. Show of hands, who's heard of Learn Tourism before the last couple months? Yay, congratulations, you each get cookies. They're out in the hall and they have somebody's QR code on them. So Learn Tourism started with the concept that, or the recognition, excuse me, that a lot of the education that was available in the tourism industry just sucked. It was awful. After attending 20 years worth of trade shows and conventions and seeing the same speakers over and over, having folks standing at the podium and no interaction with the audience, and the fact that the people who weren't there didn't have access to it, we realized there had to be a better way to do this. So along with our co-founder, Sheena, who's in the back, Sheena. Hi. Sheena's an instructional designer and educator by trade. We decided we were going to figure out what it would take to make education better for the industry. We did about 4 years of research in psychology, education, adult learning, data technology, you name it, and then COVID struck. And that was the opportunity for us to take this part-time idea that we had and bring it to the forefront as a full-fledged 501c3 nonprofit organization. That was, of course, 5 years ago. Over the last couple of years or so, we had the chance to get to know the JV Media Institute, Sarah, and the DIY Tourism Conference. And when presented with an opportunity to bring our talents and insight and knowledge together, it was a no-brainer. One of the things that makes this conference particularly special is that it's not a bunch of speakers standing at the podium lecturing you. It's not a bunch of folks who you'll see at 10 other trade shows talking about the same thing that you learned somewhere else. It's an opportunity for you to dig in and build comfort in these tools that you can use to make your businesses better. That's why we have classroom style seating. We hope to see your laptops out. We hope to see your tablets out. We hope to see you taking notes and participating. So this has been a fantastic adventure, and I have to take a moment to thank Sarah for pulling this all together. If you have any questions about who we are and what we do, what our passions are, please feel free to stop any of us in the hallway and ask. You know, I am a nerd. I love to learn. It took me a long time to realize that that was my passion in life. It's not, you know, the great restaurants. It's not the great things that I see. It's the fact that I'm learning. And that learning is something that we have in common with our travelers. Travelers visit new places because they want to see new things. They want to understand new culture, try new food, and continue learning. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our learning expert, Sarah. It's all you.
Thank you. All right, so I just want to say this has been a long time coming to have you all here. So I'm so grateful this morning. I feel like I have waited months for this event to happen. And so I just really am grateful to have everybody here in the room today, because I know usually that would have happened in November and it wasn't able to happen. So I'm super excited to just see everything coming together today. We're learning with you. Right? So every speaker we have, every sponsor that's here, all of the Learn Tourism staff, myself now included, we're here to learn alongside of everybody. So everyone in this room has experiences. You've been probably playing with different tools. You've been marketing different things. I want you to feel not only like you're supposed to receive information here, but that there's a lot that you can give to the other people in the room, right? So I think one of the things about the technology today is we're all using very similar tools, but none of us are using them exactly the same way. Things are changing so fast. I've actually been kind of blown away in the last like 18 months that every year, the longer I'm in this industry, I hope that it's going to slow down a little bit so I can breathe. And we just keep ramping it up higher to the tech. So there's just so much that I'm never going to be able to do it all, right? There's no way for me to know it all or learn it all. I have to have other friends, other colleagues, other amazing people that are doing the work to sort of share their opinions. So don't be afraid to disagree. Don't be afraid to ask questions. don't be afraid to say, that didn't work for me. Here's what worked for me, right? Because I think we all need that kind of feedback, especially when we have a couple days just to focus in on our learning and our education and have fun with it. So on that note, I want to dive in to our first topic today, which is behavioral trends in travel and tourism. And one of the things that I want to say about this is that, it is a very broad topic. We could have just done this talk for like 8 hours today if we wanted to. So I tried to highlight some things that I think are stronger and that are important to be thinking about and really taking away as we go into the rest of the year. Our goal, like I said, for me is to really sort of look at what are the trends that we can thread through lots of things. Some of you are coming from destinations. Some of you are coming from small businesses, attractions or tours or things like that. I tried to really look at trends that I think are going to impact all of us in some way, and most of all, that will be impacting our storytelling and how we kind of approach our storytelling in the digital world. And as, like I said, the weather showed us over the last couple of days, we're just living in a world that's entirely unpredictable and it's changing really fast. And I think it's really important now more than ever as we think about marketing that we remember it's a relationship. And that one of the key things we're doing is in relationship to our audiences, our customers, our visitors, even our own staff. I consider them part of our audiences. We really have to start listening to what they want and need in an even deeper way. And we're going to touch on that, I think, throughout this entire conference, that relationship piece and how important it is. But I've really gotten to a point where I wish I could throw out the word marketing altogether. Because I'm just like, really, it's so much deeper and richer than that at this point, because I think it's really about those relationships that we build. So we're going to review some trends and identify some opportunities. And we're going to explore some strategies for how we sort of take trends and turn them into action items. So it's great to know what's going on in the world, but if I don't know how to apply it myself, then it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And then we're going to share with each other how these trends are already impacting our work. So as we go through, most of you know, if you've heard my keynotes before, I like to make them interactive. I don't really want to stand up here and talk at everybody. So as we go along and I touch on these trends, I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you, turn to the person in front of you and share something. But I want you to really think about like, I heard this. How does that relate to what I'm doing? And it might be that there's some trends that don't relate. And that's completely acceptable, right? So what we're really trying to do, I think, over the course of the next 2 days is identify where we can really put our energy, invest ourselves, our time, our money, our staff's time, whatever it is. How can we really sort of choose the right things going forward? And we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, in every session as well. To start us off, when I was working on this presentation, it was funny. One of the things that came to me all of a sudden was, I feel like I want to start with a little bit more kind of bigger picture, right? And as I really meditated on it, I was like, we're going to start with a little bit of biblical knowledge. My father was a Baptist minister, so I was like, we're going to start with biblical knowledge and some Greek philosophy real quick to kick us off for the next couple of days. So the first thing is, if you're familiar, I believe it's in Ecclesiastes, what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Right. And so I think in a lot of ways, as we go through all this change and kind of unpredictability, this is what being a person is about. So just if we look at the bigger picture of humanity, even though we're going through a lot of new challenges, and for those of you that are from Western North Carolina or maybe Eastern Tennessee or other parts of states where you got hit in the last few months by weather disasters and things like that, those new challenges, as big as they are and as much as they affect us, the truth is we're not the only people to go through those things. In all of history, lots of people have gone through those things. People are going through them right now, right? Because of the weather over the weekend. So I think we just need to get comfortable with the fact that some of the trends I'm going to talk about today, you probably already heard. I'm not, reinventing the wheel. I'm touching on the things that I think we have to remember are going to be true no matter what as we go through some of this process. And there's also a Greek philosopher named Heraclitus, who's probably one of my favorites, mostly because of these three concepts that he came up with. Universal flux. He once said you cannot step in the same river twice, and that was because the water is moving. So even if you're in the same river, every time you step in it, it's different water. because it's flowing somewhere, right? He also talked about the unity of opposites, right? He said the sea is the purest and the most polluted water. For fish, it's drinkable and healthy, but for humans, it's not, right? And what he was trying to say through that process was, look, opposites are actually the same in some ways. They kind of unite together, right? And it's possible for two things to be true at the same time, even when they seem like they're opposing. I was talking yesterday to somebody about, our experience here just in the city of Asheville with Hurricane Helene and the struggle of going through that disaster, watching so many people that I care about lose things, while also having amazing opportunities like Learn Tourism bringing me into their fold. And how it took a lot for me to say, I'm going to be happy about something in the middle of this really difficult thing, right? But the truth is, that's actually what it is to just exist in this world, right? A lot of things might seem contradictory, but they're still true at the same time. It's all happening to us. And then he also had this concept of logos, which was sort of his version of God, which was behind this all, there is something. I don't know, he would call it logos really meant the word, right? So, he wasn't really willing to call it God, but he was like, I do see that there's something here that's kind of in the background that is, sort of this structure or this force behind everything. So I just wanted to start us off with this idea because I think as we're looking at some of the trends that have been happening for quite a few years, again, they might not be new to you. I think it's the same thing as before. We're going to focus on certain things that have always been important, but at the same time, they are completely new, right? So for me personally, it's things like AI. I've been studying algorithms for my entire career. I've been studying machine learning for 18 years. I know a lot about it. I'm very comfortable with it. And yet somehow everything is different now. And I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I have no idea how it works, right? So those things can be true. I can have all this knowledge and understanding. And I can also have this completely new thing that is sometimes confusing and making me really work hard to understand it and dig into it. So I think that's what I really wanted us to have as a theme for the next couple of days is just getting comfortable with that reality. And I will just say overall, as we go forward into 2025 with just everything that's happening in the world, I think this is a good energy to ground yourself out into. And especially for those of us that do marketing and promotions, we're on the internet a lot. We are exposed to tons of different stories and information, and sometimes you're taking in a lot of contradictory information. And so I just wanted to share this with you because this is part of my sanity, right? Is thinking about these things so that I can hold space for everything that's happening, right? I can hold space for disaster and opportunity. I can hold space for some people being very angry and upset and some people being very happy. I can hold space for my business to be thriving and also facing really, really intense challenges. Because again, all of those things are true. We don't have to pick a side. We actually have to live in a world where we can validate all of those things. So the first trend I want to talk about is the rise of experience-driven travel. And this has been a conversation for, I think, quite a few years, but we are still seeing that travelers are really seeking unique and immersive experiences, right? So sort of the traditional sightseeing way of going about things has really shifted. People want to have a whole all-encompassing moment when they're traveling. They want to be sort of deeply connected to things. They want to do activities that, have all sorts of different impacts on them. Sometimes those activities make them comfortable. Sometimes those activities make them try something completely new for the first time. But I think we're really seeing that sort of this old paradigm of like, this is what people want. The majority of them are cool with this stuff. It's getting much more personalized. And people are saying, when I go on vacation, I want to have the experience that I choose. If you look at some of the stats right now, 90% of travelers plan to spend the same or more on activities in 2024. 98% of them are choosing destinations based on how unique they think the experiences are. And 98% of them said experiences are very or extremely important. So the activities that they do, regardless of what they are, that matters to them a lot, right? It's not just about the place. It's not just about the accommodations. It's not just about kind of who's there, but it's also like, what are we doing? Right? If I'm traveling alone, what am I doing for myself? If I'm traveling with other people, what am I doing with the people that I care about? especially when we look at the younger markets. 50% of travelers are really looking at this culinary piece. And again, this is not a new trend. We have some self-proclaimed foodies in here. I'm definitely on that list. I would eat my way across every country that I'm in most of the time. But we're really seeing like that type of really specific experience. And there's lots of different ways a culinary experience can play out. I was just recently teaching at an agritourism conference in Lexington, Kentucky. And that was something I was really excited about in the agritourism world, right? Is how many farms are creating these incredible, unique culinary experiences that you might not find them anywhere else. This has really given rise to the experience economy, right? So there is a lot of different things that come up when we talk about experiences. Like I said, it's so broad, but there are some great studies around what are the top relevant things that people are talking about. So when you get a chance to look at these slides, you can dig into some of this in more detail, but it's things like, the sea and the beach, or nature, relaxation, or music. That's been another big sort of trend that I love, where Beyonce and Taylor Swift are creating whole vacation movements based on people going to see their performances, right? So to me, this global data that we're looking at too is not just about the United States, it's about everywhere, that this is permeating kind of across the globe, that travelers kind of want to see, what is it that I'm going to be able to do? How am I going to be able to get involved? So again, how do we apply this, right? The first thing I think is promoting the unique things that you have. And also, if you don't have things that you feel like are that unique, how do you bring the other businesses that are in your community to talk about how to make it unique? That's something, again, I think the ecosystem that everybody has in their community of local businesses and companies that are in your region, how can we encourage them to sort of get outside the box and come up with new, fresh ideas that will say, if you come to our community, it's really different than what you've experienced somewhere else. User-generated content. We're going to have a great session where Olivia Ward talks about this in relationship to social media, but UGC is continuing to be very, very powerful, right? So the more that you can get people to share their experiences, talk about what they did, talk about how they did it, talk about why they did it, the more you can really engage people online. And then really thinking about how to bundle things together. This is something I am very proud of my Asheville and even Western North Carolina community for. Lots of our small businesses here know each other, work together. I know we have Romantic Asheville in the house this next couple of days. They're a great example, I think, of how their businesses that are connected through there come together, right? So a lot of the bed and breakfasts that I know on Romantic Asheville, they also all know each other and they figure out how to work together. And I think that that can be expanded in a lot of ways to create new experiences and come up with new ideas. So I want you to take a minute, like I said, turn to the person next to you or in front of you or behind you and have a conversation. We're just going to take a few minutes. But what's the most unique experience that you're offering right now? Or what new experiences do you think you'd like to launch if you could? Awesome. All right, so again, we're going to keep the conversations going, but I am going to stop you so we can make sure we get through all of our trends today. The next one is hyper-local and community integrated travel. This is something that I think culturally, especially in the United States, we're really going to see that as local communities realize that they need to come together and pool their resources and do different things. Again, we sort of just went through that in a lot of areas over the last few months. I think we're going to see this trend even deepen in the coming year, right? Where people really think about how are we contributing to the local community? How are we contacting the local community when we travel? And how do we make sure that the interactions we're having with people are really authentic, right? And that we feel like we're kind of showing up in a place and really contributing and giving to them in different ways. So when it comes again to sort of the global perspective, 66% of travelers say that they want to see local culture and local communities. They want to know what the locals want to do. They want to be a part of things. I'm a big fan of New Orleans, and I feel like that's something every time I go there, I really want to be a part of, right? Is kind of just acting like I live in New Orleans is one of my favorite things to do. Also, 75% of them express a desire to really travel more sustainably, but they're not just thinking about the environment anymore. They're thinking about contributions to the local economy as part of that sustainability in their choices. So we're kind of expanding, I think, the conversation around sustainability. It might have to do with the environment, but it might have to do with the economy. It might have to do with a lot of different things, the local business ecosystem, right, that makes a difference. So again, how can we take action on this? I think the first thing is fostering collaborations, right? So really looking at partnerships between local businesses, destination marketing organizations like Explore Asheville or Visit Jackson, things like that. How can we bring all those people to the table and cross-pollinate? I'm a big fan of thinking about getting with other people in your industry as a small business and really figuring out how you work together and collaborate. Because I really believe small businesses are stronger when we work together, because that's how we can sort of compete in the marketplace in a bigger way when we do that, right? The second thing is the Live Like a Local campaigns. I'm sure, how many of you have seen this somewhere in the ecosystem, right? I've started to see this pop up pretty much everywhere I go. And again, for me personally as a traveler, I love this because I love to go and kind of act like I live somewhere, even when I don't live there. That's been one of my favorite ways to kind of explore different areas and find those hidden gems that I'm not going to find so easily on the internet. It's a lot easier for me to talk to somebody and ask them those questions. And then, of course, we all know storytelling is really a huge component when it comes to marketing, but really looking at when you are storytelling, how do we really focus those narratives on the local community and the local culture? So is it local chefs, local artists, local historians, and other types of residents? How can we sort of engage them to say, we want to talk about what you're doing specifically, tell that story, and hopefully the visitors will then have a deeper connection before they even get here, whether that's through social media or email or our website. I think in a lot of ways, sometimes when we're doing content, we're like, we need so many ideas to keep the content flowing. But I think once you start to look at how do we really put the narratives more specifically about different people, different industries, different businesses, and how they're special, we start to realize we have endless amounts of content, right? There's lots of different ways we can talk about things. So let's take a minute to share with each other, what partnerships or collaborations are you already doing, or have you been planning for the future where you're working together with somebody? Or are there already unique narratives about what you do that's already really working well and you're excited about the response that you're getting? All right, so again, another trend that we know is happening and has been going on for a long time is this idea of sustainable and responsible travel. There's still, I think, continuing and growing emphasis on eco-friendliness, and that's again not just in the US, but that's kind of across the globe. Sustainability is also becoming now more of a bigger picture, not just environmental, but how do we look at how we keep communities resilient in many, many different ways. So when it comes to eco-friendliness, I think it's pretty fascinating to me that this just keeps moving forward. So it doesn't matter where you are, if other people are saying, we're not going to pay attention to this anymore. The truth is, travelers are still valuing it, right? They really care about their impact when they go somewhere. So 83% of travelers worldwide believe that sustainable travel is really important, right? It's a top of their priority list. And the sustainable tourism market is predicted to grow to over $5 trillion in the next 3 years. So I think anything that you can be doing to think about this, how do the values of your brand relate to sustainability in some way? And again, I think we can be more broad and more open about what this means, because I think really, sometimes you have limited budgets, you have limited ability to do all the different eco-friendly things, but you might be able to do small things, right? And when it comes to local economies and the local business ecosystem, I feel like there's a lot of different ways that you can plug in and say, this is how we give back. This is how we contribute back to the community, right? And people want those stories because it helps them make a decision about where they're going to go. So again, we want to highlight any of the eco-friendly initiatives that we're doing, big or small, right? So there's no judgment, right? If we're making an effort, we need to share that effort with people because again, it's a value statement. It helps them connect into who we are in a deeper way. You can also really create guides for different things around this topic. So I think if you live in an area where, For instance, I think there's lots of places where if you're more rural, people have to drive. There's not as much public transportation, right? So we don't have the ability to say, oh, you're not going to use your car while you're here, right? We're like, no, you're definitely going to use your car to get around. But there might be other things that we can say we know are actually powerful ways that we're doing good in this respect, right? So again, we want to just think about that environmental footprint, and we want to say this is how we're able to contribute to this, and really see it as anything, any movement that we can do is really important. For us, even at this conference, one of the conversations I had with the hotel was, did everybody need a plastic water bottle on the table? And you all got my email saying, bring your water bottles, because that's just something we can do, is not add to that waste while we're here. It might seem like a small thing, but to us, that's like a way that we can contribute to keeping things out of the landfill. And I feel like that matters in a lot of ways, right? Especially when we're bringing 100 people together. And then any type of green certifications. Everybody's communities, states, even countries are going to be a little different in this way about what's available. But I think there's lots of different things you can get involved with, all the way down to a local level, like in your own small town, all the way up to national types of things that you can get involved in. So again, it's not about whether or not you have the biggest, most robust kind of program. It's about whether or not you can just make little small changes and let people know that this is something that you care about. How many of you are living in an area that has pretty big outdoor recreation? Right? This is why I love this crew of people, because that's where we live here, right? In Western North Carolina. Outdoor recreation is really important to us. That is something that I think has tons of opportunities for us to think about how we tell that story and care about the earth and take care of our outdoor spaces, especially for anybody in this room, like those of us who live in Western North Carolina, have gone through a disaster. It becomes even more important to participate in this, right? We're going to have quite a few years here of cleaning up what has happened to our outdoor spaces, especially if you look at something like the Blue Ridge Parkway, right? They have a lot of work to do up there before everything is back to how it used to be. And so there's different ways that you can contribute to things like that that we might always think of as kind of like, oh, I'm being environmentally friendly, but it's like, no, you are. Anytime we help the earth, right, and we take care of her in different ways is, I think, very, very powerful and good for everybody. So again, share with the person next to you. Are there any eco-friendly or sustainability initiatives you've worked on or want to? Is there anything like this that you've already incorporated into your marketing plan or your messaging? And just, yeah, come up with some ideas to share. So we are coming up on the last few things here. So the next trend I want to talk about is the digital first decision making. So again, this is nothing new that people use the internet and especially their phone to do a lot of different research on what they want to do when they're traveling, right? But now that AI is kind of coming into the front end of things, right? So I always tell people AI isn't new. It's just been on the back end. We've been walking around with it in our pocket. We just weren't always aware that we were using it, right? But every time you Googled, every time you got on Facebook, every time you were on Instagram, that was machine learning. So essentially, we've moved AI into the forefront. And so we're really seeing those shifts of the tools that people can use to just be more personalized, kind of happening faster. Planning and booking are being impacted pretty quickly, I think. And I also have really already noticed with a lot of the larger travel sites, when I'm searching and price comparing and doing all of that stuff, I'm getting sort of like unique responses now comparatively to what I was getting before. But I think the digital part of planning is just going to become more and more kind of where people begin. The funny thing is, though, again, even though that's true, what's also true is where they begin is everywhere on the internet. So it's like we're sort of clearly saying everybody digitally starts planning their trips and deciding where to go. But we also know when we say that, that means there's like a million options of where they start. They can go to their social media and ask their friends. They can go to any number of websites. They can be getting travel newsletters and responding to different things they learn about there, right? So there's so many different ways that they're going to be making those digital first decisions. Between 22% and 40%, and this was from me looking at a number of different studies. So the range of what the studies told me were between 22 and 40%. But that many people are already using AI to plan their trips. Like they're very aware that artificial intelligence is part of what they're using in order to come up with itinerary ideas or to make decisions about different places or different flights or different pathways to get somewhere. Do I drive this way or that way? Do I take a plane or a train? How do I want to do those things? They're really understanding that AI is going to give them more flexibility to know what's possible and to kind of crunch out what the options are and decide what's best for them, right? Compared to what we've been seeing in the past. And 78% of experienced providers say most of their online bookings are coming online in some way. Right. So whether that's, your listings on Airbnb or you're on hotel.com or you've got some type of, tour booking system or bed and breakfast booking system, all of these things, they're taking up pretty much 3/4 of the actual bookings that are happening. I have one client who still makes people fill out a form and then he calls them. Right. And we had a big conversation about whether or not he was continuing that in 2025. And we did decide he's going to do that way for now. He doesn't have a big property. He doesn't need 1 million people booking. And he feels like people need a little bit more talking through what his space is like before they stay there. Because a lot of times he felt like when he turned on online booking, there was lots of mistakes. Right. So he would say, you can't bring your dog. And then people would show up with their dog. He's kind of a no kids place. And so he's like, I would tell people like we just do adults and then they show up here with their teenager and I'm like, not cool. And so it's like, I want to talk to them first. So it's not to say that this completely takes over everything, but I think for most of us, we really see that the booking platforms are really valuable and it's helping us increase revenue. So what can we do about this again? And again, these are things that you've probably heard before, but in 2025, I really want to reiterate them, right? Optimize for mobile and for search engine optimization. Again, you're going to have a session here tomorrow where we get to talk about what does SEO mean now, because it means something different than it's ever meant before, right? It's really changing. But thinking about how people search, making sure that everything can be used on a phone is still incredibly, incredibly important, right? The other thing you can do is really invest strategically in social media. So really, when we're all using social media, we all know that it has value, but it's like really understanding which social media platforms are bringing us results that we feel really strongly about. Or this big question a lot of people are asking is, how can I get away from Meta and do something else? And I've actually been having lots of conversations about that because I'm a big believer in that. But it's like really, I think just strategically thinking about social, we don't have to be on every platform. We don't have to use every single system. We don't. We have to use 1 or 2 platforms really well and actually get results. That's what we have to do to be viable as a business or to be viable as an organization. But there's so many new options in social media coming out at different times. And so it's really important just to think, am I being strategic about it? Am I really looking at what produces results and what actually is investing in my bottom line and growing what we're doing, right? Because there may be some platforms where you exist there, but you're not putting as much energy into them because they don't produce the exact same result. So a lot of auditing around that can be really valuable. And then AI chatbots, again, we're going to have a whole session on this. What does this mean? What is possible? What do they do? If you want to go and explore this for yourself, how many of you have an Instagram page? All right. One of the cool things they did on Instagram is when you go onto Instagram and you go into the Meta AI, you can actually build your own chatbot for free right now and play with it and train it. Right. And I love that. Right. So if you just Googled like Meta AI, you go in and find out that they'll let you do this on Instagram and you can have a bot that starts to answer questions like you would. Right. So this is going to become more and more important for us to understand because as this becomes more adopted by the travelers, they're going to expect that they can just chat anytime, day or night, and get basic answers to their questions. How many of you are using Meta Business Suite? Awesome. So again, if you've ever used the messaging automations in there, that is actually an AI chatbot, right? You are going to train it by putting your questions in, your FAQs, information about your events, things like that. And that is going to become a way that you can engage people at all times on their schedule. So you don't need somebody to wait 8 hours to get a response from you, right? You can have that just built in. And I think we're going to see the demand for that continue going up. And I'm also one of those weird people who's like planning my vacations, like after I worked all day and then did a bunch of other stuff, and it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm on their Priceline, like using my VIP points and doing different things. So I think there's a lot of people that when they fit in that planning, it has to be when they actually have time to investigate and look at stuff, right? So a couple things we can actually do that I want you to talk about. Have you audited your website anytime soon for usability? Are you sure that when people are on the website, it's loading fast, they can find what they need, they're clicking on the right things, right? Again, we have some sessions that we're going to talk about things like Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, where we look at how do those systems allow you to track some of these things. Or share with the person, how are you implementing AI on the front end? You might be using it to do your own social media posts, but are you using it to engage your audiences and your customers yet, right? So let's just take a few minutes and talk about that with each other. All right, so as we wrap up, I did want to touch on the shift into flexible and extended stays. So I'm just curious, as a traveler, not necessarily as a marketer or a business owner, how many of you actually like to stay somewhere for, let's say, like 2 weeks or longer? Exactly. I know some of us are lucky. I can work remote. And so that gives me a lot of flexibility. That's one of my favorite things to do. I typically spend at least 1 month a year somewhere else. Like I said, kind of pretending that I live there. I'm also lucky enough that I've moved around a lot. I know a lot of people. So a lot of times I have connections to different cities. The last city I did that in was Rochester, New York. And I really like fell in love. I don't know if I could handle the cold in the wintertime, but I truly fell in love with that city being there for a month. This is something that we're just seeing again as more people are remote working and people have just reevaluated since COVID the value of taking time, right? To be with their family, to be with their friends, to go stay with their mom, right? To go visit that cousin they haven't seen in a long time. I think during COVID, when we couldn't see people and we couldn't visit them for a little while, it really impressed upon people that it matters to take that time out, right? Especially in our American culture where we're just working a lot, like all the time. That's kind of how we roll. My last name, Benoit, is very French. And I will just say, like, French people think we're nuts that we're just working all the time, right? Or that I would ever eat my lunch at my desk is like ridiculous to them, right? So I think we've actually started to shift towards like, hey, we need that space to connect with each other. It is valuable. It is important to go rejuvenate. It is important to go take care of your mental and emotional health, right? Sometimes when things are hard. So I think we're going to see this continue, especially in a very unpredictable and sometimes stressful world that we're living in. I think more people are going to say, I need a break. I need to take a minute. I need to go away and collect myself and make sure that I feel healthy on the inside. 20% of Americans plan to workcation in 2024. So they combined working remotely and going to do something fun, right? That was part of how they put it together. So I love the kind of workcation idea. I think there's too many of us in the United States. We just don't take vacations. I'm like, well, if we tack work on the front of it, will we go? I think maybe that's a good idea for us to put it in the context of the fact that we want to be able to work, right? The average American traveler actually took 3 trips in 2024, right? So again, this idea, maybe if you can't get away for a long amount of time, you would just go away more, right? You would actually take more trips, maybe smaller amounts of time. So a lot, again, we're prioritizing this type of space that we want to spend time with people, to explore something new, to have a different experience than something we've had before, or maybe to go back and have the same experience because we loved it so much the first time, right? And so I think, again, especially in the United States, we're going to see people are really interested in, going somewhere, right? And then doing something. So how can, again, we capitalize on some of this? Offering long stay discounts. This is, again, for me, something I really love. When I go to Airbnb, I often do a lot of investigating about who I'm staying with or who I'm renting from. I typically want to make sure it's somebody in the local community that benefits from my money. In New Orleans, the last time I was there, I stayed with a single dad in a house where he's raising his kid by himself. That felt really good, right? In a city where I know Airbnb is sometimes problematic, it felt really good to go there and actually support a local person that's working class that was super amazing to stay with and would give me a discount if I stayed for over 2 weeks. So that's something I think we're going to keep seeing, those type of ideas kind of packaged up. Enhancing work-friendly amenities. So just making sure that there's reliable Wi-Fi, that there's a place to put your laptop, right? One of the things for me is I'm about to turn 50 this year. And I will just say, after 30 years of looking at a computer, my neck hurts. So like I can't sit on the couch and work on my laptop. I will be like cripple after that. I have to have like my ergonomic, my laptop has to be up here, like I have to have my mouse so I'm not like doing sorts of things to my body. And so like I'm really looking at that when I book my stays. Like if I'm gonna have to be curled up in this like big round comfy chair working on my laptop, that's not going to cut it for me. I need to have a space. I need to feel like I can go to work in the morning if I'm going to do it. So just thinking about those little amenities that you can add to spaces like that. And then again, combining like that workcation idea, combining the leisure concept into that, right? So again, people who are doing business and leisure at the same time. I know it's a really weird combination, but it is the trend, right? So just again, offering these perks, bundling things together. I love the idea of partnering with co-working spaces or cafes that are good places for people to work. So again, when I went to New Orleans last time, I stayed with this great gentleman and his daughter. They gave me a bike with my rental, and the co-working space up the street was only like 5 blocks. And I would get a discount if I called them and said that he sent me. That set me up to have a place to go some part of the time that I was there. It made him look good because they got business out of it. It made me feel like I was going to really have a good situation down there to kind of go and pretend I live in New Orleans, which is just one of my favorite things. So again, share with each other, how's your community encouraged people to stay longer? Are they even doing that? Right? Are you even thinking of visitors that would take more than like a weekend or a week? And how are you reaching out and engaging with business or digital nomad communities? Does that even exist where you are currently? Right? I think if it's not really something you're used to, then you might want to consider how you can expand into thinking about this. But let's go ahead and take a few more minutes. All right. So thank you all so much for just engaging with each other this morning and having great conversations. I just want to also give a shout out to our online folks this morning because they are cracking me up. I really appreciate all our virtual attendees just contributing and being part of the conversation today. A few other things as we wrap up. There's, like I said, trends we could have talked about all day today. These are just a few that are kind of highlighted in some of the research I've been doing. So road trips, about a third of the people are still thinking about that. Slow travel, which has to do with mindfulness. Slow travel, about, a quarter of the folks are interested in just being more mindful, being more intentional, having some space on their trips and things like that, right? Home away from home, right? That's sort of how can I travel and have the, great kind of same experience of comfort that I have when I'm on the road, when I'm actually at home. I want to have that reflection. Multi-generational family trips. Again, that's something that I think we've seen a lot of people invest in after COVID. How can we bring everybody together and doing a little bit different than the typical family reunion, like kind of thinking about how it can be more unique, more fun, how we can have something for everyone in the family as far as activities. Micro vacations, which are basically like 4 days or less focus to the long weekend kind of idea. Off-season travel, again, that's something I'm a big fan of. I do like to go places sometimes off-season because it gives me more space. There's less people, and sometimes I get to do things that are a little bit more unique. And then staycations and solo travel are still trending. Again, I'm a big solo traveler. That's something that I really love to do. I will say I have like 10 million selfies in my Google Photos. Because when you're traveling by yourself, a lot of times you're just like taking pictures of yourself in amazing places. But I think those two things, again, staycations have a little bit more to do, again, with that home away from home feeling, right? How can I sort of be close to home, be comfortable, be in a world that I feel I belong, and also do something special for myself, right? So again, I know here in Western North Carolina, that's something I love, is that I can go in any direction in an hour and be out in the mountains in some beautiful place, having an experience, even though it's not very far from home. And there's a lot of positivity there for folks to kind of have those experiences. When we look at, again, sort of this bigger picture from Google, Google does a lot of tracking of trends and data studies on things related to travel. If you weren't already aware, they're definitely always trying to take over the travel market as much as they can from the Google perspective. They just put out some really interesting research around international travel really increasing by 60% by 2040, that they think international travel has been on the up and up since we all came out of the lockdowns and everything. They see that continuing forward. I do realize that That'll depend on the political situations, how that's playing out. But I do think a lot of people have started to get back into going overseas and things like that. I think right after COVID, a lot of folks stayed domestic and visited a lot of different places in their own countries, but we're kind of back to this movement towards people going to different places they've always wanted to see and having that experience. They sort of identified two markets there, emerging and mature. And by mature, they don't necessarily mean old, but they do mean kind of experienced, right? And they see that emerging travelers tend to want to go to destinations that are actually also mature, well known. They know what to expect. So if I'm maybe younger, or maybe I just haven't traveled a lot over the course of my life, I might choose some sort of safe places that I think I'm going to, lots of people have said are amazing. And I'm going to go to those places because they are reliable and we know lots of people enjoyed them. I think here in Nashville, our example of that is the Biltmore Estate, right? So lots of people, if they haven't traveled a lot, when they come here, that's one of the first things they do because it is just really well known. It's something that most people will say is worth going to see. And then mature travelers, people who've experienced in travel, they've actually been doing it for a while. It's part of, what they love about life. They tend to be in a space where they want to go find all those off the beaten track, kind of weird, funky places they've never been. They want to have a little more challenge. They want to have a little bit more maybe stretching of their comfort zone into a different culture, things like that, right? So I thought it was interesting that Google is really talking about how we kind of look at these two markets and think about, are we attracting people that are new to travel? This may be their first time, or, they've only been a few places and they haven't gone that far. So maybe they live in Georgia and they've been to Tennessee, but they're going to go to California for the first time, right? And that's a big leap as far as space is concerned. The one thing we find though is whether they're mature or emerging, they're highly informed. And in that spirit of digital first, they're conducting extensive research before they do anything, right? And a lot of that comes from the fact that they want to feel confident about their choices. And so when I think about emerging markets, people who are newer to travel, I think about how we need to create content for them that gives them that confidence to make the decision. This place is right for you if A, B, C, D, E, right? If this is your first time doing something, this is the best way to approach it and really giving folks that type of content, that type of support. And also, like I said, thinking about the mature travelers and how we can say to them, here's something you never heard about. Here's something you didn't know was possible, right? Here's something that we just launched this package or we just launched this new experience, and you want to be the first person who does it, right? How can we make that part of our messaging? Google's also right now talking about something called influence maps along with this BCG research company. And this is where the customer journey is starting to kind of shift. So we all know sales funnels, we all know customer journeys, right? Which is how people engage with us across the internet and in person and in our other marketing. Google has been working with BCG to talk about how there's sort of what they call the 4S behaviors, right? When we're talking about digital, which is streaming, scrolling, searching, and shopping. And they're really starting to say in the past, we've looked at things very linear. We're thinking to ourselves, the customer journey is, awareness, consideration, and then they buy, right? They become a customer. Or there's many variations of this that might be more detailed, but it's kind of that linear perspective. They're like, actually what's happening is when we look at digital, and we look at people who are streaming information, they're scrolling information, they're searching for information, and they're actually shopping for literal products. That happens in the awareness phase, in the consideration phase, and in the buying phase, right? That those types of digital engagements actually happen throughout that customer journey. And so they're kind of advocating that we just throw out customer journey altogether and we start thinking about influence maps, and that this really has to do with where are people influenced to say yes to what you're offering? And can you identify over time which parts of their digital experience of those 4S's is like driving awareness versus consideration versus actually making a purchase, right? This is going to be an ongoing conversation of how we really think about this and quantify it. It really just shows you that through the entire customer journey, there's all these digital things happening. And if you think about those 4S's, within each one of those buckets are many, many different platforms and strategies and tools, right? And so we're going to keep having this conversation as Google continues to expand their presence in the travel and tourism world. world, especially as they continue to put Gemini into a lot more of their systems over time, which is their artificial intelligence. But I just wanted to like add this to the trends conversation because I think it's really interesting sometimes. Google has some of the largest amounts of behavioral data in the world, right? When it comes to how people use the internet. And so I often pay attention to them. They have a website called Think with Google, and they give away a lot of free research there. And that's where I sort of go sometimes just to tap into behaviorally, what are they seeing? Because there's so few places that just have millions upon millions of data points of what people have been doing on the internet for the last 25 years. And so they have all that and they can utilize that to come up with this type of perspective. So we're going to take a quick break. Your next sessions are going to start at 10:30. I know we started a few minutes late, so I appreciate the extra few minutes for this morning's discussion. But as we always say at JB Media Institute and now Learn Tourism, you do amazing things. More people should know. I really hope this morning you've generated some ideas, especially in talking to each other. And again, I'm so grateful to have you guys here. I really look forward to the rest of the next 2 days and the sessions. And please don't hesitate to let me know if you need anything today. Thank you.